Rule 62. Hey, wait a second. I thought there are no rules in 12-step programs, only suggestions. What's this Rule 62 I keep hearing about? And come to think of it, what are the other 61 rules? How many rules are there? Today I'm going to explain what Rule 62 is, what's the story behind Rule 62, the tradition associated with it, and why the other 61 rules got the axe. And most importantly, why Rule 62 matters today as it applies to you as an individual. Let's break it down. Hi, I'm Mary, your holistic recovery coach. Today we're talking about Rule 62. Look, I'm going to fast forward right to the punchline and tell you right now, in the spirit of transparency, what is Rule 62? Rule 62 is don't take yourself too damn seriously. Really, that's what the rule is. But I think the story and the context behind Rule 62 is what's really interesting. What is the story behind Rule 62? Rule 62 comes from the history explained in Tradition 4 of Alcoholics Anonymous. If you're not familiar with 12-step recovery, there are the 12 steps and there are the 12 traditions. The 12 steps are a series of actions suggested for individuals to take to get and to stay sober. Then there are the 12 traditions, which are the guidelines for the group and for AA as an organization to keep it alive and functioning in a relatively healthy manner. It's been said that essentially the 12 steps keep us from killing ourselves and the 12 traditions keep us from killing AA. So if you don't already know this, AA is pretty loosely organized as an organization. And sort of like how the 12 steps keep us right-sized as individuals in recovery, the traditions help the organization stay right-sized. It's not corrupted by power and politics. It's guided by suggestions and a light structure to gently keep things together. The traditions outline what has worked to keep it that way. One of those gentle guidelines is in Tradition 4, which brought us Rule 62. Tradition 4 states that each group should be autonomous, except in matters affecting other groups or AA as a whole. So this tradition basically states that the main entity, AA, is not going to control what each group does. Each group can make their own decisions involving what their individual group does, as long as their group doesn't hurt another AA group or AA as a whole by what they do. In the book 12 Steps and 12 Traditions, they outline some of the history and how the traditions came about. Rule 62 comes from a story in the chapter about Tradition 4. I'll quickly tell you the story. Back in the day, there was an eager group of AA in a little town in America they referred to as Middletown. Back then in Middletown, the AA group saw a need for a whole array of services to help all the alcoholics in their town. They came up with this elaborate plan for a facility that would have multiple floors and different programs for different aspects of recovery. There'd be an AA clubhouse on the first floor, some type of financial floor next to help alcoholics who needed some help getting back on their feet, a third floor about education of some sort. Needless to say, it was a lot more than simply running an AA meeting, and it got pretty complicated and confusing pretty fast. So, of course, there were a few concerned AA members at the time who thought to reach out to the main AA office for their input and advice. If they were hoping to get AA's blessing on this, they did not. But like this tradition suggests, they weren't going to tell them what to do. They were, of course, warned of the potential dangers of trying to take on something like this. But they did it anyway. So the group went ahead with this giant project, and they came up with a bunch of rules and regulations to try to ensure its success, despite the warnings. And it actually took off. They got quite busy, but of course, chaos and confusion ensued. And they quickly realized it was indeed far too much for an AA group to take on. So remember I mentioned there were all these rules and regulations they came up with to try to force and control their idea into being? Well, guess how many there were? 61. 61 different rules and regulations to try to manage this humongous enterprise they insisted upon. On admitting defeat, they humbly reached back out to the AA office to let them know of what had transpired and how they wished they'd paid more attention to AA experience on this. And in that correspondence, they included a little card that read, Middletown, Rule 62. When you open the card, it read, don't take yourself too damn seriously. And so it became a classic. Rule 62 to this day remains talked about in recovery circles many decades later. So what happened to the other 61 rules? Well, obviously the point is they were too much. And the lesson was not to overcomplicate things and humbly being able to laugh at the error of our ways. And the only rule worth carrying forward was one that came out of creating 61 rules to begin with. Rule 62, don't take yourself too damn seriously. So how do Rule 62 and Tradition 4 relate to the individual alcoholic today? Well, the cool thing about the traditions in AA is that they often can be applied to the individual as well. With Tradition 4, which ultimately gives groups the leeway to make their own mistakes, eventually if a group wants to survive, they're going to conform to the guidelines set forth to them that actually make the most sense. Similarly, the individual alcoholic, if they want to survive, will surrender to certain principles and suggestions that prove to ensure the individual will survive and thrive. Let's face it, alcoholics can sometimes perhaps be control freaks or rebels. And either way, think that we know best. We could bulldoze forward with an idea without really thinking it all the way through. And this Tradition 4 addresses that. In Tradition 4, the AA organization is essentially telling groups that they can run their groups, their meetings, however they see fit, as long as the decisions they make don't somehow injure a neighboring or other AA group or injure AA as a whole. By laying it out that way, AA as an organization is sort of leading by example and not being control freaks. And instead, they're giving individual groups enough leeway to make their own mistakes and learn from them, kind of like we're able to do as individuals working the 12 steps. Obviously, applying the concept of Rule 62, which was crucial for that Middletown group, is absolutely an important concept for an individual recovering alcoholic. In order to stay sober and function as a healthy individual in recovery, it's best for individuals to not take themselves too seriously, like Bean over there. Having a sense of humor, being able to laugh, particularly at oneself, is a healthy asset. While the disease of alcoholism is a most grave matter, being life or death for many people, recovery and sobriety involve a balance of serious work on oneself along with humor and levity in order to enjoy the sober life as promised, being one that is mainly happy, joyous, and free. This reminds me of another recovery concept explained in a brief video about We're Not a Glum Lot. So check that one out next if you haven't already. Please drop a comment below and let me know any other recovery concepts or topics you'd like me to cover. Thanks for hitting the like button, and subscribe to my channel for more practical and intuitive content related to holistic recovery, healing, and personal growth. Have a great 24 hours ahead. And don't take yourself too damn seriously.